So one of the major perks of this podcast is I get to have some conversations with some smart and impactful people. And this week is no different. I am speaking with somebody who's had a massive impact on my practice, has had a huge impact on my ability to better understand and treat pain. And I can definitely speak for a lot of my colleagues and friends who would speak the same. He's one of the more humble and giving people you're going to meet in the profession. We're truly blessed to have him in the profession. And he has really moved a lot of people and pushed a lot of people forward to grow and to improve their understanding of pain. Adriaan Louw is a researcher, educator, and leader in the profession. He continues to pump out amazing amounts of research with his research team and all of his support staff. This week, we're going to talk about some of the challenges we face as physiotherapists and as healthcare professionals within the pain world. We'll speak about some of his research, and we'll kind of discuss some of the recommendations he'd have on students and young career professionals. I really think you're going to enjoy the episode this week. Leave some comments and let us know what you think. Enjoy the episode.
This is the Modern Pain Podcast with Mark Cardula.
Welcome to the podcast, Adriaan.
Hey, Mark. Nice to see you.
You know, honestly, you've pretty much achieved legend status in the profession. I know you would never say that because you're a humble dude, but I mean, I would say that because you've had a huge impact on a ton of PTs, not just PTs too, OTs. I mean, you've had a massive impact. So I just really want to thank you today I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
No, happy to be not a legend, just a little part of the puzzle, but no, it's great to be here. I prefer to do this in my job, so if we can keep this for hours, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, we'll do a marathon episode for you. We'll do like the Labor Day telethon episode. No, but I was hoping today we could talk a little bit about kind of your professional roller coaster, and then kind of reflect it on back as far as how we're developing our understandings of pain and where we are, where we were, and hopefully where we'll go to. So I was wondering, I mean, most of the folks on the podcast obviously know you, but maybe just kind of give folks an update on where you're at, what you're up to. And then I'd love to hear your reflection of how you started in physio and your professional roller coaster that brought you to where you're at today.
Yeah, I mean, where am I today? Juggling a lot of things between teaching, research, overseeing faculty, those kinds of things. I mean, there's a lot of different things I'm doing. As far as my background, in terms of, I'm no different than you, Mark. You and I've had our times to sit and chat about this, but I was an orthopedic manual therapist. That's it. Find it, fix it, find it, fix it. And I went through incredible training. And it just stopped working. People always ask me, how did you get in pain? I failed. And I don't take it lightly. I mean, it still hurts when I think about it. Like, oh, geez, you dedicated your time to this craft. You did your thing, and as you get good at it, or gooder, I should say, you start seeing the more complex patients. Well, I don't know what to do with you. Go see Mark over there. Go see Adriaan over there. And then we started seeing the complex people, and they started coming with these weird things like, what makes your pain worse when it's cold out? Well, I put on a sweater. I mean, it's surely it's not C4. I mean, come on. And so, and I mean it, kind of facetiously funny a little bit, but that was where I was. I didn't know what to do. And then, wow, I'm telling you, talk about karma and fate and all these beautiful things. But went back to South Africa on one of my trips and, went to my instructors, told them how terrible they are because I don't know anything about pain. And then, I said, yeah, there was this guy from Australia, David Butler, read this paper. And it was an old neural tension paper in 1995. And I find it intriguing, but it was still very mechanical. Came back and got his book, the Blue Book, Mobilization of the Nervous System, read 3 pages and probably had about a headache after that. I couldn't understand any of it. And then went to a class. I went to a class like all of us do, right? I sat in the front row in Dallas, Texas. Never forgot it. David Butler walks in, starts talking about pain, puts up Louis Gifford's model. This is in 96 before it's published. And I look at this thing and it changed my life instantly. I was like, holy crap. The facet joint has a brain. The facet joint has a football team, right? You and I talk about football a lot, and it just blew my mind. We were taught in manual therapy to zoom in, and suddenly we zoomed out and like, whoa, there's more to this. And so I would be remiss to say, I've been around a lot of cool people. I am here partly because a lot of people have been kind to me. It's funny, I spoke yesterday to somebody about the exact thing that there's so many cool people in the pain world, and they're all kind. There's a couple of jerks out there like me, but there's people are kind. You reach out and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute, or can I get your idea? Boom, there they are. They hop on a call. They email you. I mean, so a lot of kind people. David Butler, Lorimer Mosley, Louis Gifford. I mean, the list goes on. I don't want to leave somebody else. I don't want to mention people, but And then you go, whoa, wait a minute, and you work your way into it, and how cool is that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think our journeys kind of parallel a little bit as far as the kind of the manual therapy struggles when it's kind of looked at in that narrow view of like find it, fix it. I'm curious too, your views. I mean, EIM does a job of kind of integrating pain science into some of their, weekend intensives and things that you guys put on there. I'm just curious, like overall, do you still think there's a struggle? And I think implicitly we probably all go through a struggle of like, this threatens my comfort zone in the clinic of, I'm a find it, fix it type person. Yet, as you mentioned, there's people that come in that just do not respond to that approach. It doesn't really give justice to the complexity of their experience. I'm just curious, as you kind of just peer over the kind of landscape of maybe not even just physio, but where do you feel we are as far as trying to move past that find it, fix it, or that narrow kind of biomedical tissue focused way of looking at pain, especially in the musculoskeletal world?
Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy, probably. I believe we're actually light years ahead. Maybe I'm in the wrong place, but when I go to AOMT, when I go to CSM, when I go to these conferences, there's a lot of pain science. I mean, the famous quote, tweet from Paul Minkin, right? I showed up at AOMT at a manual therapy conference only to find a pain science conference breakout, right? That kind of a thing. So yeah, we kind of jokingly now sit in the back of the rooms going, yay, this is so cool. But no, I mean, it is so neat to see these orthopedic-based groups do their thing, which they should. And then there's pain science. And I think the blend is amazing. It's a classic thing, Mark. The pain science people need to get more manual. The manual people need to get more pain science. I think the people that are threatened by it is the people that don't understand it or don't understand it the way we do. I get the whole thing. Sometimes people think we're just trying to put a square peg in a round hole, which I don't think so. I have a very narrow view of pain because my pain science came out of manual therapy, so I see them parallel. The pain people that I encounter may have never done pain science, and we encounter a lot of them in our fellowship where, they have no manual therapy background, but then they bring their richness in with, mindful movement and all these things. So, no, I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be. I think we're going to see. We know there's people out there that are saying, hands off and all that kind of stuff. Whatever. It's sad. But I also know it's that people are trying to be provocative and trying to get readings and ratings or whatever. The sad thing is that the young kids are picking it up. The next generation's like, wow, manual therapy sucks and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of a sad commentary. But on the flip side, it's their time. They can make their choices. We made our choices, good, bad, ugly, right? There were things we couldn't care about, which is now a big deal, which is like, oh, crap, we should have learned more about mindfulness-based stress reduction. We should have learned more about sleep, nutrition, whatever. So it's their time. So they can choose where they want to go. We can just inspire, hope, and, give it to them. But I am encouraged with manual therapy in many ways. And I think another piece of it would probably tie into a little bit of dry needling, which I know is probably a big, whoa, don't go there. But, I don't know why we do it. We're always very exclusive. It's this or that. And I think as oldies are beginning to like, yeah, that's good. It's not the way I do it, but yeah, that works. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, we do tend to eat our young in the profession for sure. We tend to get very territorial to where, it's got to be my way or the only way. So I completely agree with you there. Your research team obviously reaches back all the way into like middle schools. I believe you're doing some of your pain neuroscience education and doing some research on that. But if we bring it to like DPT education, and I know you have your hand in that a little bit or have had your hand in that. I don't know if what you're up to currently with that, but curious what you think, like where are we as far as DPT education? I think it's improved. We've got the pain education manual that the folks over in the pain SIG and things in our ortho section have really done a great job with. Where do you see DPT education now, and where would you like to see it as far as maybe, I always wonder some of these professional boundaries that we constructed when we had this very narrow view of pain of like you're a psychologist or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. We're seeing such a blending of these and some blurring of the lines a little bit, which I think is helpful because our patients sure need it. Yeah. But I'm just curious what you look at when you see DPT education and where you think we are and maybe where you'd like to see us maybe improve going forward.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. First of all, I could not be happier. I mean, the whole ISP guidelines taken on by the SIG, the manual that Mark Shepard and people like that have done Great job. Absolutely. I'm actually so excited. I always jokingly say I'm like 1.5 step away from Green Shady Acres nursing home. And my happy time in nursing home would be when I sit there and we can look back and go, you know what? Today's PT student is walking out and knowing stuff that you and I took years to develop, right? It's going to be no different than manual therapy. When clinical prediction rules came out, and I know we're now speaking our language, there were PT schools that would show a video of a manipulation, cover the articles and say, we covered it. Then there was people like the Louis Bundaduras that, taught PT students how to manipulate the cervical spine repeatedly and whatever. And so, and in a good way, I mean, obviously, but so it's going to vary. We're going to have schools take on pain science and cover just the most basic and be done. Then there's schools that are going to jump into this thing, hook, line, and sinker. But I see more of that. I get inundated with students and little, student groups that, hey, can you meet us for lunch in services, whatever. So I'm very excited. I think we're like literally there. Now it's CAPT mandated, so it must be there to some way, shape, or form. But how cool would it be if the next generation walks out and can be at a level which you and I, like I said, took years to get to, right? For example, they walk out, they understand pain phenotypes. They understand, some of the most basic neuropathic mechanisms of pain, brain scan imaging, pain neuroscience education, a little bit of greater motor imagery, neuroplasticity. This is that's very heartwarming, if you will. So that's a good thing. As far as boundaries go, I can tell you this, that, I mean, obviously during COVID, both APTA and AOTA came out with position statements about our ability to screen for and work with behavioral health issues like depression, anxiety disorders, etc. We strongly urged clinicians to head in that direction because guess what? The psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, etc. is begging us to do it. We were also like, where do we stop? There's not enough of them. I mean, Mark, we can agree, disagree about a lot of things today, but I think it wouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out there's not enough mental health in the world / United States. And so I've always looked at, for example, depression as a continuum. And I think our very skilled people, our psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., should be treating people on the one side. But then your rehab providers, your PT, OT, athletic trainers, chiropractors, whatever, should be able to take the other half of it. What if we gave people a PHQ 9, and if you score below this number, you go to physical therapy, occupational therapy, whatever it would be. If it's above this, you go this way. And the same treatment that works for chronic pain works for depression. And so we did a study with P&E. We taught P&E to people with depression, and we shifted them from moderately high depression to lower depression because they understood more about their pain, so they felt better, and we could measure it, right? Aerobic exercise, sleep, nutrition, all these things. So I do believe there are cutoff points. And in our world, it is when these yellow flags become red flags, right? When then we can cut off these things carefully. But it's encouraging. It's very encouraging to see where the profession's going. I really believe that the Pain SIG has done a phenomenal job. And I know there's a big push about trying to get it out underneath in its own academy, those kind of things. Now, that itself is a monstrous task. But yeah, there's people doing it, and good for them.
Yeah, I've mentioned, I know like Kathleen Sluka and a few folks have been kind of looking at that move, and I didn't realize the gargantuan task that is to make that happen. But I'm appreciative of folks that are working hard, like her, Mark Shepard, and all the folks at the Pain SIG. Like you said, they do an amazing job with things. As far as I'm curious if you can kind of discuss a little bit about how you've went into even the, like we said earlier, before even DPT school, where you're trying to and test, like, if we can improve, children's beliefs, kids' beliefs on pain, and how that can impact their, in turn, pain understandings and things like that. I mean, what kind of projects have you done? And do you got anything going on right now in that realm?
Yeah, we long story short is we've published about 8 or 9 papers now, where our goal was basically to teach middle school kids about pain. Today's kids are tomorrow's adults, and if we really want to change things like the pain epidemic, opioid epidemic, etc., we got to go way upstream. These are upstream initiatives. We just one day decided, David Butler and I talked about it for a long time. And one day I was just driving home from a class and I called Jesse, our friend Jesse Podolak, and said, Jess, hey, you got 2 boys, right? Yeah. How old are they? Well, so-and-so. And we came up with it literally while I was driving, this idea of let's go to middle schools. Long story short, today we go into middle schools, 30 minutes one-on-one. A PT standing in front of the room, PT/OT, teaching about pain, and we've shown we can change their beliefs, we can change their knowledge. We then pull out all the information they're currently taught about pain in PE and biology, whatever. Taught one group that, the other group got P&E, and drastically better in P&E. And then I think the big one was, Mark, we took a huge trial where we took kids, we taught them about pain, tracked them through the school year, and they used 30% less pain meds during the school year. More, they missed less school. They attended more PE sports, recess, those kinds of things. So all the good things, right? As far as what's next, we have translated now into Spanish. So we're moving into other versions of it. We are exporting it, meaning we're doing some trials in other countries, because I think how cool would it be if you can do it on a global scale? Teaching parents. Ken Tampinko in California, instead of teaching the kids, teach the parents and see if it will filter to the kids, right? We just got done with a virtual reality version of it just for fun to see, can we do it in VR? Can we scale it? Those things. So there's a lot of little things. And in pain right now, one of the hottest things is pediatric pain. Felipe Reese's work in Brazil, Joe Neese's team, they got a team working on this. So we're constantly collaborating on those ideas. We deliberately chose middle school because around 5th, 6th grade, you can take on more advanced concepts, but also that's where health literacy is. And that's where kids actually set up that early adolescence where they set up their behaviors about things like smoking, exercise, all those things. And so I think, we tested it. We've done it now in 9 different states, different studies. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great pursuit. I know, we look at some of those studies. I remember the PAGE study that I think you introduced me to when we're talking about what predicts a kid's pain state a year out from a decent orthopedic procedure is how mom and dad are behaving an hour or to 12 hours after the procedure. So it's amazing just to see. But I'd love to see how that research pans out, because I do think the upstream approach definitely is going to be huge to put a dent in some of the cultural beliefs and some of the, not just obviously culture ethnically, but just within families and things like that, to start breaking some of the patterns of thoughts and behaviors that can kind of, pervade and make it maybe a barrier to some of these kiddos having a better perception of things. Lifestyle medicine, we kind of touched upon that a little bit already with what you talked about, but I'm just, curious to like your views on where we are with lifestyle medicine. I know you've preached, these things with sleep and looking bigger picture than just, our traditional, maybe narrow view as physios and getting into lifestyle medicine. Where do you feel like we are in that kind of realm of like that lifestyle medicine approach? And where do you think, best practice lies when it comes to that? I know it's obviously a little subjective, but that's why you're here. We want to hear your opinion.
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, I'm not a lifestyle medicine expert, not even close. There are people around me that are, and I love listening to them. We anecdotally have done it, Mark. I mean, think about it, right? We work with people in pain and we talk about sleep. We start bringing nutrition. We start talking about stress reduction. We address things like risky substances, etc. But in itself, there's a big movement in medicine. I do know that the physicians are big on this one, right? Driving more healthier choices, those things. In therapy, unfortunately, the reality is we do whatever gets reimbursed. And so lifestyle medicine's biggest barrier is going to be the fact that therapists they can come to a course, go through it, go like, oh my God, this is so cool, but I cannot do it tomorrow. Now, if you work in a very affluent area, or you have a private practice or you have a private pay clinic that can lean itself in that direction, that there are definitely people doing it. I know that for a fact. But for us to be able to do it at scale, something will have to change. And that brings us back to the old idea of, preventative medicine, all those things which, that's not something that we even compute in medicine nowadays. I think for us as therapists, lifestyle medicine will be where we take the content and almost break it into pieces and then attach it to traditional treatments. So I'm a manual therapist, and I manipulate your neck and I do my thing, but we talk about nutrition. It's not a program. It's a piece of what I do now. I know I'm completely messing up lifestyle medicine for the lifestyle medicine people right now, but if we want more clinicians to do it, they're going to have to probably break it into little pieces and use like P&E. We've done P&E in little pieces. It wasn't until it now becomes fully fledged use, but a lot of cool stuff out there, a lot of therapists moving in this area. But the thing that's going to drive its uptake is going to be reimbursement. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Yeah, and that kind of brings to a question that I always am curious. As far as we have a lot of systemic barriers, in the, especially in the United States healthcare, there's just some challenges with, some of the things you mentioned with reimbursement and things. I'm just curious where you see some of the barriers that the challenges that we face as like physios who are trying to provide best care. We have some, settings where it's hard to get a one-on-one time to really hear a story and have that time. And there's obviously settings that do an amazing job balancing a pretty high caseload and still being able to provide that care. I'm just curious where your thoughts are on like some of the systemic barriers we're up against and how do we solve them? I want you to solve healthcare's issues in the matter of a 5-minute answer, but no, I'm just curious what your thoughts are as far as, those kind of systemic barriers we're facing and, some of the challenges we got.
I know what my answer is, but I'm not sure I want to tell you because, I don't want to be people throw rocks at me. Mark, I go back to something David Butler told me years and years ago. I think we're our own worst enemies. David told me years ago, our biggest problem with getting pain out at scale and to change the world is our own clinicians, our own therapists. And I'm being very blunt with you. Apathy, ignorance, the list goes on. And again, I get it. You were kind of veering towards the burnout side, which I can talk about in a minute, but we have to take the message to the consumer. The interesting thing is if people think about it, right, from a business perspective, even if you take the message to the consumer, now the consumer goes to their doctor and says, I want X, Y, or Z. That's direct marketing. That's direct marketing to the consumer. Then if the physician sends him to you and say, hey, I want you to do this. Well, you just actually reinvented the wheel. I think our biggest barrier could be our clinicians. And I mean, no disrespect. I'm heading out today to go teach a class and I will be there and I'll give them everything. And I appreciate people giving up their weekend again. I don't know why we do it, but give up your weekend. So I appreciate all that. And I know people are going to throw rocks at me, but sometimes I'm concerned about us being our own worst enemy. We tend to do this all the time. There are other things. It's always going to be reimbursement-based stuff. It's always therapy is so reimbursement. Manual therapy right now is going through a very hard time with reimbursement. So suddenly people don't do manual therapy, which is the dumbest thing in the world. You just bill it different. I can't believe I just said it. That's unethical. No. Your treatment's your treatment. You just and again, so the systems are not very well designed that way. I am concerned about our workforce. The APTA just came out 2 weeks ago with a huge document, report, if you will, with a lot of the stuff going on, and workforce is our concern. People should not work the way the Adrians work, probably the Marks work. The younger generation should take care of themselves more. They shouldn't be burning the candle at both ends. So I think I'm concerned. We have a large turnover of our younger folks, and it concerns me because we will never get ahead if you don't have a healthy workforce. That I've always said, if you're not healthy, how can you make somebody else healthy? If you're sitting there, you're tired, you're irritable, you're cranky, and now Susie walks in and she's hurting everywhere. How can you say, hey, I'm so happy for you to be here. I cannot wait to work with you. I got so many cool things to offer you today. It doesn't work, right? So yeah, well, where do we start? Where do we end? But I think it does come down to things like work-life balance, which again, older people like me, don't even know how to spell work-life balance, which again is actually not a good thing. It's interesting because in our office we do have a younger girl working now with us oldies, if I will, and it's interesting to watch her, and we're actually learning from her behavior. It's like, no, we're done. We need to go home now. Really? Okay, fine. We'll go home now. So anyway, so that's one part. I think apathy with our profession, we need to get better there. I think reimbursement. And then on top of all of this, Mark, I don't know, that doesn't answer the question, but I do think regardless of all these barriers, we still need to go after the person. What can I do today to make your life better in this 30 whatever minutes I have with you? But yeah, there's a lot of barriers, but
Yeah. No, and I love your ideas of direct to consumer. I think sometimes we in this ever more competitive healthcare system where we're kind of going to doctors and begging for referrals. And I'm not saying that still doesn't have a place to where we can obviously still, do our marketing, establish our relationships with physicians and things. But I think we need to, and we live in such a unique time to where there is the internet and YouTube and all these things. Look at Bob and Brad. I don't always agree with what Bob and Brad said, but they've done some good things overall.
They got a huge following. They get
massive.
Millions.
Yeah. I mean, Bob and Brad are doing well. I can only imagine how well they're doing I'm jealous. I will say.
Are you going to have them on your podcast? Come on, Mark.
I probably need to chat with Bob and Brad. I've not said anything too mean or nasty. I appreciate what they're doing. Again, it's a beauty. It's nice when you can have discussions with folks you don't always perfectly agree with, but you have a nice civil discussion. So not a common thing you find these days with social media. But I'm puzzled why as a profession we're so, and maybe you're curiously, what do you think that barrier is for us to putting ourselves out there in front of a consumer and just bypassing this maybe traditional, like, hello, Mr. Physician, can I please have a referral? And again, I'm not saying that's completely wrong. And I love establishing good relationships with physicians and showing them some of the amazing things we can do in PT and helping them from probably some of the burnout they're dealing with, dealing with some of the complexities that hit their clinic door. But I'm just curious, any thoughts you have on what you think our challenges are, or why do we struggle so hard or much to get that message in front of consumers? Is it what we're not being taught in school, or is it just a kind of a humble meekness that us, Peace Corps PTs, I know I've heard us being called, where we're so like friendly, we don't want to ruffle the feathers or put a message out that might not be perfectly, putting the, somebody else in front of us. I'm just curious what your thoughts are and why we struggle with that.
Man, I feel like you're setting me up here. No, I mean, the stuff that immediately comes to my thought. Just remember that, you and I have a very orthopedic outpatient first access PT first mentality. We grew up this way, right? The idea of PT first is so foreign to an inpatient orthopedic therapist or an inpatient acute care or a neurology or pediatric, etc. So we only represent a small piece of the pie. And then also we have academics, right? We have our academic team. And again, academically, they think of the world different, and that's fine. They have to, because we need them to educate. So that's always my concern, right? We represent this piece of it. But what happens, unfortunately, Mark, is, I see it in states. When states fight for legislation, right? We want to take on dry needling or direct access, or we want to manipulate. We always give something up. And so we'll do this, but not this. And it's interesting because instead of banding together, so for example, right, I remember specific manipulation legislation where therapists actually we put forward some legislation for, I think it was dry needling or manipulation, and a legislator or whatever's daughter was a PT, and he asked her, what do you think about this? She said, we should never manipulate. Well, she was a neuro PT. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. So it's a very diverse group, and we don't understand what other people do. And so tomorrow, if say there's a big neuro initiative, I'm going to use a stupid example. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but let's say tomorrow we want to make it mandatory that every person with a drop foot has an AFO, whatever, right? I know nothing about it, but I need to educate myself, to talk to my neuro people, or they need to do a good job telling me, guys, this is important. We need you to band with us and call all your legislators. So I think we cover such a wide spectrum that we're diluted by design, unfortunately. And so I think we just care about our thing that we do. There's other things too, but the way we've always been placed in healthcare, I think therapy has climbed. I mean, Mark, bottom line is when I grew up in PT, the bastions of therapy was Australia, New Zealand, England, Canada, for the northern Scandinavian countries, the Norwegian approach, if you will. I will tell you straight up, I've covered dozens of countries that I travel. The hottest place right now for therapy in the world probably is America. What we're doing here is on another scale that people don't understand. I think we always think, well, we're American. No, we are driving it from the evidence-based medicine, the research. If therapists could just wrap their mind around the volume and the quality of research we're putting out. The DPT, I know it's a pain, and I know it drove up student loans, but it took us there's a lot of good things happening. So I don't want to just look at this cup half empty, but there's a lot of good things happening, but I think by design it's hard. We don't all agree because I don't know what's happening in neuro. I don't know what's happening in peds. If this was a peds one, I was in a peds one 2 days ago at the middle school program. But if they ask me my opinion about some pediatric thing, I'm like, I don't know. So when they vote on it, I don't know. But yeah, it's hard, right?
Yeah. I wish there was easy answers, but they don't exist. Complex topics, which I appreciate your thoughts on it. I wanted to touch upon a little bit of research methods because it's one thing I toil with a bit too, and I understand the place of a nice randomized controlled trial. Yeah. But then I get talking to folks like Roger Carey, and I get talking to folks like Ronnie Low-Allengium and Matt Lowe and folks, and they've really had me take a step back and look at the philosophy of science and, empiricism, where we're really trying to resolve unique cases and look at, well, what's the means and averages of human behavior when we're dealing with unique people. And oftentimes their pain presentation is very much impacted by their uniqueness and their experience and their stories and things like that. And that sometimes, can get maybe lost a little bit when you're trying to resolve them to this, standard deviation or p-value and things like that. I'm curious where you see like research methods. I know it's a bear of a project to do like a mixed methods where you're doing like quantitative and qualitative. And I know you've done both, I think, the qualitative and quantitative side of things. I'm curious, where you see like research methods, where would you see the ideal way to where we can start capturing, the patient voice better and really giving it because the thing of like, it's the subjective thing, where it's just, this isn't the real data. It's the real data is the objective, but we're going to do the subjective interview. And I think we're still in this healthcare system where, and I know obviously what you're teaching and what we, preach here is like, that story is a huge part of the data that you need to be using to help a human in pain. But I'm curious where you think research needs to go to maybe help that become. It still needs our quantitative data. I'm not by any means saying that we need to scrap that approach. It's just, it's limited when it comes to maybe understanding unique humans. I'm just curious where your thoughts are, from a research perspective, where we could go to maybe better encapsulate that.
Yeah, there's a lot of big words. And I think you actually just summarize it there, Mark. Pain is an N of one. Every person's pain is unique. And we do. Research has become an average of averages, and we just put people closer. So what about the people in the outliers? Easy answers today. Every time one of our students bring in a qualitative study, I have a seizure because I'm like, how am I going to publish this? We can do this study, but there's no, first of all, we have to create the pathways to publish. And so right now, if you submit a qualitative study to any journal, it's extremely hard. By the way, if it's a mixed method, yes, because then it's at least a little bit of real data, right? Which is just a bunch of crap. I love qualitative research. My research world started in qualitative because when we built the preoperative P&E program, we started with qualitative studies, interviewing people that have had surgery and what did you struggle with post-op, so we can build something pre-op to address it. I just sat with another therapist. I wanted to design a study. He wanted to do stuff for people, say, I think it was diabetic neuropathy. And I said, well, what do people struggle with in diabetic neuropathy? Well, I don't know. I said, well, then how can you build a program? You have to understand the consumer, the person. I'm a big fan of those case studies. I was so happy when JOSPT came out with the case studies opportunities because I need the clinicians that listen to you to really consider case studies, because we use case studies as springboards. Like, wow, that's cool. Look at what Mark did there with that one patient. Let's build a bigger trial. And then you go to case series or whatever. So I echoed 100%. I love the idea of qualitative research, but I just wish there was, from a methodology perspective, an easier way to get it out there. The methods, I think, can be tightened up. But I think that whole area, because not a lot of people do work in that area, the whole methodologies have fallen apart a little bit. Like, well, you generate themes and you mix it with quantitative, whatever. But if we get an easier path to publish those, then I think there'll be more activity, which will then strengthen the methodology. But it's everything you said. I mean, the big ones will get the attention, the RCTs and the systematic reviews, the meta-analysis, the large data sets. But it is tough. I'm not
I mean, you've been my pathway to publishing as far as you were so kind to let me jump on a study with you and Ina Diener, or more of a kind of a paper, which I still greatly appreciate. I'm still figuring out where I fit in my research agenda. And it's because I get frustrated with the exact question I posed to you. Yeah. And I don't know where I fit in that. But anyway, I have your ear now, so I'm going to nerd out a little bit with you and see if I can get some questions that I'm always curious where your thoughts are, because it's just, things that toil in my head and brain, and hopefully the folks that are listening will benefit. I think hopefully it's questions they have too. Immunology. I'm not asking you to be an immunologist. I'm not claiming you're an immunologist, but I think as physical therapists, I just see this patients with this, pro-inflammatory, pain phenotypic, where these people just have a lifestyle that is inflammatory in nature, not by personality, but by just, biology. And I think we're seeing how all these parts of a human experience can really impact, inflammatory profiles and different things with that. I'm just curious where you think our knowledge base is on that whole immune inflammatory continuum that people kind of function on. And I mean, where do you think we need to be a little bit, maybe sharpen our knowledge base and skills around that?
Yeah, I mean, Mark, the link between inflammation and pain is set. There's no debate anymore. It is so easy. And then you got to think, okay, where does inflammation come from? And then you can talk about all different kinds of things from, nutrition. We can talk about exercise or lack of exercise. We can talk about lots of different things that drive inflammation. The immune system's link is very powerful. We now know with chronic stress, which could be pain, if you live in pain every day, drives the immune system. Cytokines, especially pro-inflammatory cytokines, become more prevalent, which wakes up the nervous system. So now I have more pain. And so it starts as a horrible vicious cycle. So as a rehab provider, we need to start thinking, okay, what do I do every day that's anti-inflammatory and what can affect the immune system? And there's a slew of it, right? We know exercise. There was a huge study, about an 8-year worth of research out of Sweden that showed that exercise is anti-inflammatory in RA, which just blew these guys almost won the Nobel Prize for medicine as therapists, which is mind-blowing. We know about foods that are anti-inflammatory, the whole anti-inflammatory diet, right? So it ties very closely to immune. We know immune buffering behaviors include things like sleep, exercise, nutrition, the list goes on. I think as we learn more, and that brings us back again to lifestyle medicine, I think they're very closely linked to these, but the stress part of it, the chronic stress part that sits around pain with now I got appointments and I have the unknowns and doctor's visits and co-pays and living in pain. That stress process drives this the immune system, which then fuels up your inflammatory processes. So yeah, it fits together. I know it's always like, oh, here we go again. It's anti-inflammatory, but they're so close. David Butler told me way back, I'll never forget it. We were walking down on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and it's almost like he just put his finger in my face. He said, Adriaan, don't ever forget, nothing wakes up the nervous system more than inflammation. And I've never forgotten it. I can almost tell you where on Fifth Avenue we were standing when he told me that, and I've never forgotten that. So what can we do to eradicate that? But behind it, there's an immune system that is extremely rampant, and that brings in the whole gut brain axis stuff, which there's people on that I cannot even spell that. But it's interesting to see people go that way. I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff in that field right now.
Oh, completely agree. And it's a fascinating field. It gets a little heady when I was trying to get into some of those articles that just get into definitely many words I can't pronounce nor understand. So, but I appreciate your work and kind of distilling it to more of the physio masses where it's, in a message that is a little bit more palatable. It's been hugely helpful for myself. And I know I can echo that for a lot of folks that have also taken a lot of your courses and things like that. So I want to respect your time today, Adriaan. I appreciate, again, you spending it with me this morning. But always I'd like to ask folks, because we get a lot of patients, audience members who are like early career professionals, some DPT students.
Yeah.
And, there's this, and I probably was one of these DPT students. What am I getting taught with all this pain science? We're getting taught wrong. And I had to learn and humble myself. Usually patients do that a good job. But I'm just curious, like your advice to folks that are struggling to find their footing, maybe it'd be DPT school, maybe it'd be early career. What would be your advice to them to kind of help them navigate some of those challenges when the textbook may not teach exactly perfectly in line with what current research is saying? And that's every profession. That's not physio by any means. It's, and then folks that are struggling to see, navigate that PowerPoint black and white world with the world they see in the clinic, which is a lot more gray and muddy and doesn't have that nice A, B, C, or D clean black and white answer. I'm just curious what your advice to folks who are struggling with that would be.
Yeah, it's hard. I would tell the PT students that are in school that's kind of getting through it, you're only as good as your base. And so it's okay. You are now in a stage in your professional development to work on your base. I jokingly tell people, like, I cannot believe on a Saturday afternoon of a 2-day course, I'm telling people about action potentials. When I walked into PT school and the instructor talked about action potential, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I want to just learn how to crack a back. And now I'm getting all giddy to tell people about action potentials. You must have your foundational knowledge. I know you want to learn how to stick the needle, or how to crack the neck, or how to miraculously teach people about pain, but your base is the critical. Work on your base. You have a long history, a long road ahead of you, which is going to be shaped by your patients and your instructors and your CIs or whatever. But that's why I love things like CSM. That's where you go and geek out for a few days and just get oh my God, this was so cool. But then we go back and we do our craft. You got to get you get your base right, because you're only as good as that base, Mark. And then you can build on top of that solid base. And then you go this way or that way or whatever. I know it's a little frustrating. And people look at us and like, wow, look at what they're doing. Yeah, but it's taken, I can tell that I've been more than 30 years, right? I didn't get here yesterday. It's a long process. So just once you're on it, then you go find what you want to do, but you have to have a strong base.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think sometimes we want to arrive as an expert, but we don't recognize the journey it takes to get there, and set some of that good habits early on with your base, and learn some just good concepts of good critical thinking and clinical reasoning, and surround yourself, geek out, bother Adriaan Louw at CSM. I've given you free reign to take them to the side and ask him questions. But and truly, you've been one of the more generous persons with your time that I've come across, as far as sharing wisdom, sharing knowledge. Like I had mentioned earlier, you've been a great influence on my career, and I can't thank you enough. And I, again, want to thank you for your time this morning, and hope you have a wonderful travels to your course and teach some folks some good stuff this weekend.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Always like to catch up with you.
Yeah, appreciate it. And those of you who are listening, don't forget to check out the episode on YouTube. Those in YouTube, we do have it on the podcast networks, all distributions. If you can maybe leave a review or maybe subscribe to the YouTube channel, that would be wonderful, so we can get this message out to more folks. But we will leave it at that this week. Hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you next time.